Controlled Chaos here. I am here with Damon Osgood, a developer from Stars Reach. How are you doing today, Damon?
I'm doing great.
That's great. So, what I'd like to know first off is sort of your background, how you got into the game industry, and some of the big games you've worked on.
Well, so you're going back quite a ways. I started in the games industry in the '90s, um, doing little boutique games. It was really before the World Wide Web was a thing. I worked on the games for the Prodigy online service. So that's just to say I've been around for a long time. Kind of helped the internet grow up with gaming. Um, my biggest claim to fame, I suppose, is Star Wars: The Old Republic, for which I was a lead
Uh-huh.
programmer. Um, but I've worked on a lot of MMOs, um, and most recently, in the past 10 years, I've been working for BattleNet at Blizzard. So
Okay.
more a platform gig than a game gig,
Yeah.
um, but still, very big in the MMO kind of space, right? In the
Yeah.
space.
Well, I mean, with World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft and Overwatch and Diablos, various Diablos, all sorts of great things coming out of Blizzard.
So, you did mention that you worked on some MMOs. What are those MMOs that you've worked on?
Star Wars: The Old Republic was the biggest one. I've worked on Star Wars Galaxies. Um, I worked on back in the old Kesmai days. Kesmai was did Air Warrior, and we had a BattleTech 3025 game that it didn't quite make the light of day, but it was close. Um, and then in the earliest days, we did for the web, we did some. You wouldn't call them MMOs, and at that point because we hadn't coined that term, but they were they were multiplayer online games,
Yeah, MUDs.
MUDs, or they it was a political simulation, to be honest. It was
Mhm.
like during the presidential elections, we were just doing this social game where people would come and represent fictional uh, political candidates, um, and trying to and simulating an election of these fictional candidates. So nothing. It didn't really look like an MMO the way you look at it today,
Yeah.
but early stages. It was a multiplayer game online. Um, with a lot of the same sort of social problems that you have today in terms of managing players and keeping everyone happy, operating a live service.
Yeah, so you mentioned several games though that I was very interested in, disappointed that came out, and games that came out that I really enjoyed. The BattleTech MMO that you were talking about, I was excited about that. So was my brother. We big
Yeah.
BattleTech geeks, so excited and so disappointed when that didn't come out. Star Wars Galaxies. I loved Star Wars Galaxies just because of the difference it brought in of the way it did the skill system, and the crafting was so important in that game.
Yep.
And then having cities, and that's what interests me in Stars Reach is what Ralph Costner has done with that whole entire system and making it even better and bigger, and then doing some different things that I really like. What caused you to want to join the Stars Reach team?
Well, the Stars Reach is a beautiful game, and it's going to be revolutionary. It's a little risky though, but I'm
Yeah.
at a point in my life, in my career, where I'm looking for risk. I'm looking to break, push some boundaries, take some chances. So it seemed like a great opportunity um, to do something unusual. And it's a very unusual game, right?
Yeah.
It's not your standard story driven MMO. Um, it's not World of Warcraft. It's not Star Wars: The Old Republic. Um, it's not even Star Wars Galaxies, even though Raph designed Star Wars Galaxies.
Yeah.
Um, they had to make compromises in Galaxies because of people's expectations for a Star Wars game.
Mm.
that we don't have to make here, right? This is all unique IP. It can be exactly what Raph wants it to be.
And that's the really nice thing is with him doing it on his own IP, there's nothing that will cause the shutdown of it, of someone saying, okay, the license is over, you have to shut down type of thing. And plus, like you said, he can be more creative with what he does with the world that he's creating and not be limited to things such as he's mentioned being stuck in a certain timeline when creating Star Wars Galaxies and the number of Jedis and stuff like that in
Sure.
his own world. He can just say, this is what it is and this is why I'm doing it. I really
Right.
like that.
We can craft the IP to exactly match the game that he has in mind.
Yeah. So what is your position at Playable Worlds for Stars Reach?
So I'm a technical architect, which is just kind of like a level above lead engineer, if you like. I'm basically an engineer, but I in addition to having engineering, direct programming role, I look forward. I look at the technology that we're building as a whole. I try to make sure that we're heading in the right direction, that we're building a not just a game, but a system, a business from a technical standpoint.
Okay, so I mean, with doing Stars Reach, that had to have been a really challenging job for you, considering what they're doing, especially with, like, for instance, the modifying of terrain and having that in MMO. Now, yeah, modifying of terrain has been done in like No Man's Sky, but it's never been done in MMO way where it's server side information held and then sent out to other players. How challenging of doing that kind of stuff is that?
It's challenging. It creates a lot of problems that most MMOs don't have, because the world is not a fixed thing. It can change out from underneath the player at any time, and so we have to run this pretty complex simulation, this voxel simulation, or as we call it, the cellular automata. Um, we have to run that, and we have to keep that in sync with the game server and each of the game clients that's connected to that zone. Um, and then the game has to be able to adapt to changes that are current, that are occurring. So a client, may be showing, a piece of the world, and the players playing in that world, doing something, and then another player on another client could come and scoop out the earth underneath that player or drop rocks on them, and fundamentally change the terrain around the player. And we have to be able to handle that from a design perspective. We have to be able to handle that technically, and our rendering has to be adaptive that way. Um, we have to handle that from a player happiness standpoint too. Like we have to. It becomes a customer service issue and a griefing tool,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so just in terms of making sure people are playing nice, playing fair, as we used to say at Blizzard, um, we have to be concerned about a whole new kind of griefing that can.
Yeah, and I'm actually in the pre-alpha and been testing for months and been
Yeah.
seeing that kind of thing and testing around for those purposes of, okay, what can I do with the terrain to grief players? What can happen, can I run into other players and collide with other players? And I actually like the fact that you don't have player collisions, especially with having the ice in the game and sliding around. You could be on top of the mountain, and if you had collision on, you could push a player off and have them fall to their demise. And
Right.
so, that's one of those compromises as a engineer you have to make in order to halt the griefing. And that's very interesting. Same thing with the homesteads and how you have to give permissions for them to be able to edit things in the homestead to prevent griefing. And I remember when homesteads were originally put in, it was okay, they couldn't move anything around, but they were still able to edit the terrain within the homesteads. And from what I
Yeah,
understand, you guys finally actually got that fixed where they can't edit the terrain in the homesteads. Is that correct?
that's correct. You can't use your terraforming tool or whatever directly on somebody's homestead volume.
So, how hard of a fix was that to get resolved, or was that pretty simple?
That was pretty straightforward because we can we know what the volume is. We can control where you're allowed to target your tool. But that's only one layer of the solution, right? Because
Yeah.
you can in our game you can cause gravel to appear anywhere, including up in the air, and so you can like shoot gravel outside of somebody's volume and it falls down on their
Yeah.
volume, right? And so you're not doing anything that we've prevented, and yet or that we reasonably can prevent, because you should be able to put gravel places,
Yeah.
but we have to protect that player's volume, right?
You do, and
So
being somewhat of a not as good of a game developer as you guys are, but being a game developer myself, I thought of ideas of like, oh, do a force field that goes around the homestead, so that when the gravel hits, it hits that force field and slides off and slumps to the side. Being creative that way. Have you guys been thinking of things like that, or?
we're thinking about that, or just a simple rule like a player can always eject gravel, if that's if we can from their homestead, or that we periodically do that for them, if we can find a way to label materials that were player generated.
Yeah.
um, we will find solutions to that. It's just you know, it becomes a little expensive, right? Because you have to now track whose gravel is this and how did it get there, and and how far back in history can you go to figure out the cause and effect.
Yeah.
Um, at some point, we want, there will be situations where we want a player's homestead to be a victim of a landslide,
Hmm.
right? If the rules say, this is, a hardcore world, for example,
Yeah.
where we turn that rule on, and we want homesteads to be vulnerable in that way,
Yeah, and
because
I
that's
think
what.
I think that's a great idea, because yesterday when I was actually playing with you guys having the public events put in, there was a giant asteroid that hit in this area where someone was building a house. And
Yes, right.
so that house was getting ready to slide, and he didn't even notice it until he was slowly sliding away from where he was building and realized it and looked down like, oh, an asteroid hit here. And just watching the whole entire mountain sort of slide down was really cool.
Yeah.
And Dave was there, and he's checking how the server's handling everything and stuff like that. So you guys are keeping a really close eye on everything going on with the simulations. Is that one big tool you guys are using to keep an eye on the simulation, or is it multiple different tools that you guys have?
Well, we can just jump in the game and look at what's going on in the world like anybody else can,
Hmm.
but we don't have a way to like look at the whole world all at once,
Hmm.
or we could invent that, but and I shouldn't say that, because we certainly could zoom out, and if with a beefy enough machine you could render the entire world.
Yeah.
So, um, but right now there's not so many things going on all at once that we are trying to keep an eye on a lot of things happening all at the same time. As we get more players in, doing more things all at the same time, as these events that you mentioned get more and more frequent, yeah, we'll need tools um, to just sort of keep an eye on the whole world. How much chaos is this world experiencing right now?
Yeah.
Is it more than normal? Is it more than we expect? Um, we can count how many chunks have changed
Yeah.
per second or whatever, and we do that in a very indirect way right now. We can have a graph, right, that says
Mm.
how many dirty chunks are around the world.
Okay.
We,
So, a couple of questions I have for you is, first off, what was the hardest thing you had to code for the game so far?
Me personally,
Mm-hmm.
um, so I've only, I've been on the project since June. Um, Most of the hard stuff has been done already. Um, the hardest thing that I've worked on, or the most interesting thing anyway, um, was the audio for terrain features. So imagine you've got a lake, right, or a
Mm-hmm.
river, and that should sound like water. It should sound like flowing water or still water, or and this rule would apply. These, imagine ice also, or lava, or possibly steam or something. So we need to place audio objects, or sounds dynamically wherever that flowing water or lava is. Now, in our game, that water can or lava can appear anywhere at any time, and it can take any shape. Um, and so, unlike most games which have a static environment and you know exactly what the terrain is, you know where the water is, the large bodies of water. Um, Players can move our water around. They can add water, they can take it away, they can change the shape of a river. And so we needed a system that was going to adaptively move the sound volumes around. And so that's what I worked on.
Oh, that's you know dealing with games and making games. I've done the whole entire thing of adding sounds to different things. Whether it be water and now you're running into wood, or you're on dirt and now you're on metal and stuff like that. And you're right. Originally, it's just okay in this area, play this sound. But with you guys, like you said, moving the water around, moving the lava around, you can't really use that in this area trigger box type of technology to play a sound because of things moving around. So that has to be really difficult, and I can't wait to see that actually work out for you guys. It's going to be very interesting. Now, my next question is, what's a feature that you're looking forward to coming into the game and working
Um, well, honestly, speaking of water, I'm really, I'm frustrated that we can't swim in our game yet,
on? Mm-hmm.
and that our water is not as dynamic as we want it to be. So I'm excited for when we get to work on that. I've proposed, let's just have a water milestone or something where we all focus on, if it's movement, we're focusing on our swimming animations. We're focusing more on how water flows and how players dynamically, you know, create water, destroy water, use water in the crafting system, as a resource.
Yeah.
Um, I think that would be a fun thing for all of us, to get together and really just, um, work on as a whole. We get, we're in this mode right now where we work on as many things as possible, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
understandable.
we,
And I can tell you right now, there's a lot of players that are excited to see the ability to swim and drown and be able to move water around to
yeah,
make fountains and stuff like that. And I know that, you guys are a bit sort of cautious in doing that because, well, Raf Costner flooded a town that we were building on accident by using the tools to move things around. So, there's that cautionary state, but seeing some of that kind of stuff in there is very intriguing, especially for me because I've really gotten into uh the terraformer and stuff like that and doing the mining. I really enjoy the mining in the game,
mm-hmm.
and it's something I dread in every other game. I hate going out and harvesting, nodes and stuff like that, but I'm enjoying the mining because of the hazards your game adds into this, and having the ability to right now poke through and have the water come through and nothing really happens. Having that water be able to drown you and having to swim and figure out how to gather is going to be a very interesting mechanic that I can't wait to interact with. I know will be fun and different.
Yeah, it's funny. I wasn't even thinking about, the dangers of water drowning, but of
Mm-hmm.
course you're right. It should be dangerous, and then you will get, because anything can kind of happen in our physical simulation. You could get a situation where you're mining and all the, you're deep in a cave, um, and all of a sudden you break through to some water and it starts flowing into the tunnel you've built, and now you're in real danger. And that's kind of this emergent thing that could happen. How fun is that? We didn't plan that. We didn't script it.
Yeah.
But because of the physics of the world, it can happen.
Yeah, and that's what I like, because I mean, right now I did a whole entire video about the dangers of mining and being buried by sand or
Yeah.
gravel and things like that. Even I like the fact that the peat soil moves a little bit slower and stuff like that, and the way you guys have lava react, and you'll start seeing the material you're digging through go red, and then you'll start noticing that you're taking a little bit of heat damage as a precursor to, hey, there's lava behind here, is a nice bit of
Mm-hmm.
technology you guys have added in. How long did it take you guys to get that working, where it was actually showing the heat change in the textures and stuff like that?
Well, I think that was, a couple of weeks of work, but given all the other things that were already there, right?
Hmm.
Like, we know where the lava is.
Hmm.
We know, in each 1 meter cube, we know what the material is, so we can, you know, we didn't have to build that. So doing the analysis of saying, oh, we're close to lava, let's um, make the cubes that are not lava but close to lava. Let's warm them up. Let's say that their temperature is higher. So as a cube's temperature gets higher, even if it's solid, we're going to make it glow. Um, that's really what's going on there. We're every cube has a temperature and a material and a um, an amount of water, like a well, I'd say just how humid it is, how hydrated it is,
Yeah.
and from that we can make all kinds of decisions about what it should look like, along with the slope of the materials around it. Right, so that's how we go from cubes to the smooth terrain that you see. Right, is we say, okay, all these things. There's solid cubes, and then there's empty cubes, right? So that
Mhm.
all those solid cubes that are adjacent, they have an edge, they form a slope, um, and so we're going to smooth all that out, so it doesn't look like a bunch of jagged cubes like you would see in Minecraft, but it looks like a smooth hillside,
Yeah. And
right?
it looks really good. I gotta say, the terrain, I enjoy seeing how it looks, and how when you put different materials down, it reacts differently. Just like when I put tailings down, it sort of slumps moderately. I put down sand and it does it quicker. I put down the peat soil and it does it a little bit slower. I put down any kind of rock material, and it just sort of stays in its formation at that point. Is really nice technology to see. I want to move forward and ask you more about the game itself, and you sort of playing around in the world. I know that you're a busy person, but I'm pretty sure you do jump into the game and play it some. What's some of your favorite things to do in the game?
Oh, I do love digging. It's just very satisfying to be able to tear up the terrain.
It
And
is.
then when material, we call them dubers. I don't know if that makes it out into the players, if the word duber, but
It's the
the
first time
things.
I've heard it.
Okay, it's just an internal word for the things that fly at you
Hmm.
as you are mining, or when you kill a creature, they drop dubers on the ground, and you go and pick them up, and that's your resources, or your whatever you got off the creature. Anyway, but it's just a very physically satisfying thing, right? To be using this gun that shoots this beam that tears up the terrain, and all these things are flying at you. It's very pleasing. Um, so I like doing that. I'm kind of a story person myself, so I'm more into, like, let's go out and find all the things So I'll go and find the survey points. I'll kill creatures just to get things because I want to do some crafting. Um, I've done a little bit of building. I haven't really done a lot myself. Some people are doing some amazing things.
Oh, crazy things.
This is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So with talking about players doing things in the world, do you ever just sort of jump into the world to see what the testers are doing and how they're interacting with the game that you're working on? And what are some of the interesting things that you've seen players do that you didn't expect?
Well, I love the way that players are working together. Um, they're making guilds, even though we don't have a guild system yet. They have their own homemade guilds, and um, they're making places. They're making towns. Um, they're naming the towns. They're thinking about urban planning, and they're thinking about projects that they can do together. Uh, that's wonderful, and I think that's the best part of what this game can be is a community-driven simulation, creating these virtual worlds. We're going to get to a point where we have governments, right? Where
Yeah.
we have rules and for how a planet works that are based on how the players want it to work. Um, and so groups will be able to create their own little societies, right, in this virtual space. That's really cool.
Yeah, that was a fun thing in Star Wars Galaxies, is seeing how different towns and cities were ran and how they grew and things like that, and whether they were on the Empire side or the Rebel side and stuff like that. Seeing that go from town size to planet size and affecting the different rules that Raph's wanting to do, such as how much you can harvest of certain resources and balancing of that, whether it's going to be PvP enabled and what areas you can do that and what areas you can build in and what areas are protected, is very interesting in doing, and it's going to take that whole entire thing of governing to the next level, and I'm pretty sure it's going to have its own unique programming problems on its own. Am I correct?
Sure. We have to create the rules. We have to create the rules of the world, and we have to create ways for players to turn some of those rules on and off. And we have to create the social structures, like if it's call it guild or whatever. If you're a member of this planet, of this zone, you have a say. You get to vote. We have to create some voting mechanisms. There's a lot of work to be done there. It's not none of it is particularly hard in of itself, but except maybe just getting it right. It'll probably take us a while to tune all the things that people want to be able to control in the world, make them all available, make them accessible to everybody. Like I say, no one of those things is hard. It's just getting them all done in the right way will be the project.
Well, that, and probably also having them all play nicely with one another and not causing any problems, because I know when you take different systems and you put the system into a game, it can cause a bug somewhere else within the system. So making sure that that's all working nicely with one another is probably a big important thing too.
Yeah, that's you could call them bugs, or you can call them like balance issues, like you know a system like being able to shoot gravel into the air. That's a great system, and I'm glad we have it. But it allows people to cause grief to other players. So it's not a bug. It's working exactly designed, but it's not fun to have gravel drop in the air. So
Yeah.
balance.
Well, and the funny thing is about you talking about shooting gravel. I was actually playing yesterday and talking with Dave about how you could have this sort of combat civil engineer role where instead of having a regular gun, they're using the terraformer to shoot out gravel or drop boulders on people and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Maybe in the future. And, I know that's a really hard thing for you guys to do is not end up doing feature creep where you're constantly wanting to add in stuff and never release the game and have to sit there and say, okay, we need to hold this for a later date. How much of a struggle is that for you personally?
I don't worry too much about that. There, we don't. We're going to have a date at which we say, okay, it's launched, but we're far from done. The game will evolve long past launch. So it's yeah. There's a set of things, and we need the set of things that is mandatory for launch to be as small as possible, right?
Yeah.
So, but no smaller. And so we can work on that. We can get that as good as possible, and then we can launch the game and really start entertaining people, and then iterate over time. Even in the best of situations, these games change over time.
Yeah. Well, and some of the best MMOs that are still alive are constantly adding new things. I mean, that's why games like EverQuest are still being played, is because they have like 30 some odd expansions. Every year they're coming out with a new expansion,
Right.
adding new things. The reason people still play No Man's Sky is because the developers are constantly adding new things, causing players to come back. It's how you actually keep your player base in a game nowadays is by adding more new things to the game. So I think it's smart of you guys to go, okay, this is the date that we're going to launch at. This is the minimal stuff we have that needs to be into the game or to be feasible for what we're doing. And then everything else can be added in later. So if someone comes up with an interesting idea, you can add it to that list of future stuff to do. And then once you've launched, you can take that list and go, okay, all this stuff works well together. We can do this update or this expansion type thing. How much of a big list do you guys have right now for after launch?
I will say the list of things that we want to do is huge. um, which of those things are before launch and after launch is a debate, and it's not my decision.
Yeah.
Where that line gets drawn. That's kind of a Dave Jurgensen decision.
Okay. Well,
and Raf, but um, there will be a set of things that there will be a point at which we say, okay, we are more ready to launch than we've ever been. Let's just launch. Say we're launched and go into that mode. But then we just keep developing, keep adding features. Some of those features we knew we would add, and some will evolve as we see players playing after launch, right? And see what's popular and what's not.
okay, so another question I have is, since I started out as a game tester, I know that there's two different ways that most testers write bugs, either in paragraph form or in step-by-step bullet point forms. When you receive a bug personally as a developer, which format do you prefer to read a bug in? The paragraph form or the bullet point step-by-step form?
Well, you probably need both, right? You need kind of a sentence or two saying what the nature of the issue is. But then if you can write a step-by-step reproduction strategy, like first do this, then do this, then do this, ABC, 1, 2, 3, whatever. That's really helpful because that tells me that it's reproducible, that it's going to be easy for me on my local development environment to reproduce, identify the problem, fix, and then prove that it was fixed.
Okay.
At least for those steps.
Yeah. So basically, the way I've been writing bugs and taught to write bugs is you do your main title sentence, which is a very brief description of what the bug is about. Then you do a 2 to 3 sentence paragraph going a bit deeper into what that bug was about. Then we would write out the step by steps from the point of, okay, launch the game, log in, and then go from there all the way to the point to where the bug happens. And then we would write the um, expected or the actual results, then the expected results, and then we would give it a severity type of listing. So that kind of format is what's more comfortable for you because it's sort of like you said, the mix of the two.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I've never seen anyone write useful, good, expected results versus actual results, and have that be really helpful. Like
Mhm.
it should be clear from those two sentences that you wrote above what is expected and what's which is not happening, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that expected and actual results, that seems like you're filling out a form or a field in a Jira ticket. Uh,
True. Yeah, I mean, you make a point. That isn't helpful for the developers. I 100% agree with you. Where I see that helpful for is the higher up executives who aren't known for being in the game industry and don't have much experience. It helps them understand sort of what's going on, is the way I sort of see that kind of thing. What I think helps you out as a developer is, like you said, the description of what's going on with the bug, the step by steps, the repo rate can really help you guys out because then you know how often it's occurring to like give you a bit of a gauge of how easy it is to get that bug to happen to be able to find.
yeah, it's important to know how easy or hard it is, how frequently this occurs, right?
Yeah.
And that will also tell you how hard you should work on this. Like, if
Yeah,
this
exactly.
rarely occurs,
Yeah.
it's going to go to the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, well, and that's where a severity of like severity 1, 2, or 3 helps out. Does
Yeah,
severity 1 being like it crashes the game or crashes the system you're playing on, or is and for consoles a certification violation, or it could be a severity 2, which is it's blocking you from doing something in the game, and then severity 3 being everything else, which is just, you can still play the game. Everything runs fine. It's just a minor inconvenience type of thing. Really does help level things out. Now, when you're fixing bugs, do you prefer working on the bugs that are like straightforward, easy to fix, or do you like fixing the more complex, harder to find and solve bugs?
I think they're both satisfying in their different ways. Sometimes you're in the if you're just talking about what do you prefer to fix,
Mhm.
sometimes you're in the mood for like a deep dive into a complex system and solving a complicated problem, and sometimes you just want to knock out six things that are annoying people.
Mhm.
Um, it also depends on um, where you are in the development cycle, um, and you were talking about severity. Severity is important, and everyone's going to work on their severity 1 bugs, those blockers first. Um, but you also need to take into account frequency. Like, yes, it crashes the game, but it does it once a day, given 10,000 people playing or something. Right? So that's pretty infrequent. That's not the most important bug. Maybe that's less important than a rendering issue that doesn't really affect the play of the game, but everybody sees it and it's ugly.
Mhm.
Um, maybe work on the rendering issue first because it's a little more straightforward. You can get it out of the way, and it's a visible improvement for every player.
Well, it's just like, some of the bugs we've been seeing in the pre-alpha were, upsetting to players and stuff like that, and were complex. I'm not going to get into the details of what these bugs were, but it took you guys some time to fix these problems because it wasn't a constantly happening thing. It was a very random thing happening, and that made it hard. Or zoning crashes where someone goes to zone and it's constantly crashing. That's something you guys really need to jump on right away
Mhm.
because it can't, they're having to relaunch the game every time. that's very uh unsatisfying to the player types of situations. Whereas, if it's just the wrong sound playing when you're walking over a material, that's a minor issue um type of situation. So I like the fact that you're more interested in fixing the bugs that are making a bigger impact on the player, have a better resolve to what the player's interacting with or doing, instead of looking at, oh, this is a crash, even though it only happens 1 in 15 times, going and fixing that first. You'd rather fix the graphical issue that is annoying players, is nice. With that
You
being,
also have to make sure to schedule time for those like lower severity issues.
yeah,
Otherwise, they will never get fixed.
yeah, and no game is ever 100% bug free.
Right.
It's just not gonna happen that you'll get 100% bug free game, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And I hope a lot of other players are the same way. Otherwise, no one will be playing games. But other than that, when I can see by your background, you're big into sci-fi and fantasy stuff. Do you pull a lot of inspirations from things like Star Wars, Star Trek, and maybe even like Battlestar Galactica for this game when you work on stuff?
I do love sci-fi, and I love that this is a sci-fi game. Uh, it's interesting that it's to be classic sci-fi, if you will, or vintage in its look. Sort of 50s sci-fi kind of look and feel. Um, we have some nods in that direction. I don't think we have enough yet. To me, it doesn't yet feel really vintage
Mm-hmm.
in that way. We'll get there, but um, I don't think we've done enough in that regard. But yeah, I do. I will watch sci-fi films and TV much more readily than I will, or read novels at this point. Um, Much more readily than I'll go to fantasy.
Okay,
Don't get
so
me wrong. I did love The Hobbit. I did love Lord of the Rings.
yeah, I
You
mean,
can't take those away from me.
you,
But
you can't. Those are good books, but I'm a big sci-fi fan also, and that's where we don't have that many sci-fi MMOs that are out. Majority of them are fantasy. So when I see a sci-fi MMO come out, I pay close attention to it. And there's things like Dune Awakening that's coming out. I was like, okay, well, that's somewhat interesting. I like Dune, but when I saw Stars Reach, I was like, okay, this is its own IP. It's doing unique things. It's making a living world for players to play in, going that sandbox directions where you're telling your own story and creating your own story. That really interests me in gameplay than it does for like Dune Awakening or any of these other sci-fi MMOs. I'm really excited, especially for seeing what you guys do in space with spacecraft and stuff like that, and these nebulas going on and being able to harvest in those nebulas. Is the nebula systems and that kind of stuff going to be running on the same particle system that the planets run on?
by particle system, are you referring to the cell system, the
Yes, the cell
voxel
system.
system? Yeah, yeah. Each one of our zones will, like our space zones today, they have a set of voxels. All the asteroids that you can land on, they are voxels. They're running in the simulator, and you can use your digging tools to affect them. You can heat them, and in theory, you could make lava if the material that they're made of will turn to lava. Um, Now, that space zone that you can go to now it has a lot less, surface to affect than one of our terrestrial zones. Um, and so, if we're going to a nebula, there may be even less, place to stand, if you will, solid matter. But still, the volume will be divided into 1 meter cells, and there will be some sort of physical simulation going on there. It will probably be very cold and very dry because it's space. But who knows? It's also an opportunity to be very creative about a part of space that doesn't act the way we think it does, right?
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if you're a big fan of Star Trek.
Oh yes.
How many crazy volumes of space have they come across that don't make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah.
That have nothing to do with physics as we understand it,
Yeah.
right? Let's do one of those.
I mean, why not? I mean, you guys have gravitonium
Right.
in
That's right.
the game and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and you have materials that we've never heard actually have physical evidence of in reality. And that's what's great about sci-fi, is you guys can come up with this material and just go, okay, here's the name for it, here's how it works, and we're done. It allows you
Yeah.
guys to be very creative, but then on the same time, you're looking at things like, oh, we have lead in the game, let's actually make this react like as close as we can to lead, but favor in the side of fun. Am
Sure.
I correct on that?
I think that's right. Yeah. But I think we try to go to things that somehow make sense in a physical way. So lead will melt earlier than iron will, for example.
Mhm.
Uh, but it still needs to be fun. And if it's not fun, science or reality in the service of fun, then I think we will probably err on the side of fun.
And that actually makes the game better in my eyes. I prefer the game to be fun than realistic. When I look at things like graphics, I'm not a big fan of the realism of graphics, because then you're dating the game. Whereas if you go with sort of the hand painted textures, or cartoony textures, whatever you want to call them, I prefer that art style over the realism, because then you're not dating the game at a specific time due to technology. And whereas on your end with the coding, you really don't see that kind of effect unless it's like limitations of what you can do code wise in games. And there's been huge leaps in technologies that have enhanced what types of things you're able to code. And this leads sort of to my next question, also going back to space. How are you guys going to handle the visualization of planets in space? Are they going to be rotating and moving around and have orbits around a sun type of thing? And also the asteroids we have in the game, will those continue to be static, or will those also be moving around?
Um, I think this is more of a design question.
Mhm.
And as I said, I've been with the team since the middle of last year. They've had conversations about this that would predate me.
Mhm.
But let me tell you what I think. Um, there right now we have a space zone and the planet and a number of planets off of that space zone, right? So there will be more space zones out there, and you will link between space zones in a similar way you do now. You've got the portals now; they'll turn into spaceships or something, but you're still kind of teleporting from zone to zone, as opposed to say doing a continuous flight thing between zones.
Mhm.
We're always going to have that zone transition, that teleporting kind of thing, that portaling kind of. But there will be different kinds of space zones. So there might be in between the space zone and the planetary zone, there could be a suborbital zone, where other kinds of gameplay can occur. Um, And of course, planetary zones will get opened and closed over time, depending on how players have used them or if they're still using them. If a planet is spent in terms of its resources and nobody ever has any reason to go there, nobody ever goes there, we'll probably close it. Favor of opening a new zone somewhere that players do want to use. Now, if you're in that suborbital zone or something, will you see the planet rotating under you? Maybe. It'll probably be a skybox kind of thing. And we can do it. A skybox could have a rotating image in it, or you could see meteor or whatever flying around in the skybox of your suborbital zone. I think right now in our space zone, it's very static, and that's probably not going to change. You can't see from our space zone currently. You can't see any of the planets.
Yeah.
You just have a bunch of asteroids around. That could change. We could put a planet in view. We could put a star that is nearby in view, or the stars in that skybox. But I don't think it's going to be done in a way that's important for gameplay.
Yeah.
Right?
It's more of like just the visual representation, seeing that you're coming close to that planet and type of stuff like that.
Yeah. And if we create a solar system that has one or two stars, whatever color they are, whatever size they are, we want that to be consistent, right? We want that to be part of the identity of that place. And then there's a number of planets in that solar system that you can visit. They should have in their sky, they should have those two same stars or something like them. So that all the planets in that solar system seem to be related.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the features that you brought up was being able to go from space to atmosphere, and atmosphere be its own zone, and the planet be its own zone. I would love to see that as a feature after launch. I don't think it would be before launch, but something like that to where you could have atmospheric spaceship dogfights or fight with, the flying creatures and stuff like that would be very interesting. And I know that a lot of like No Man's Sky players would come to the game for something like that, because there's a lot of similarities between Stars Reach and No Man's Sky with the sort of the crafting and the base building and exploring the universe. I think the difference that the two have is that Stars Reach has more of an RPG natural element to it, along with the player economy, because No Man's Sky really has 0 player economy, where Stars Reach, it's 100% player economy.
That's right.
And I really, really like the fact that you guys have gone that direction, because it causes a need and a want for crafters. I think your game will drive a lot of those people who like doing crafting, even in other MMOs, to come to your game, because they'll feel appreciated and wanted in that game, in Stars Reach, because of that. And I think that's really great. The tools that you guys use for creating the crafting system, how easy is it for you guys to add in more like blueprints for crafting things and new crafting skill types?
Well, blueprints are super easy. The expensive part there is just creating the assets. Like if there's going to be a new tool, or even just the icons that you see in your inventory, somebody's got to draw that. But that's probably harder than just adding the recipes.
Okay.
Right. So we can add recipes very easily. That's just like data. Adding skills is a bit more work. It's not, we have lots of skills we plan to add. We do that pretty frequently, but in addition to the data changes you have to make for that skill tree to exist, um, there's going to be possibly new assets, new tools, and then new UI to go with that. So it's a bit more work to support the activities that skill requires. But it's still not that bad. Um, Although I will say our UI is much harder to work in right now than it should be,
Yeah,
and
well, I mean,
we're going to change that. But
yeah.
for us right now, UI is relatively expensive.
Yeah, and I mean, in pre-alpha, prototype pre-alpha stage, your UI is not your guys' focus. It's getting in the gameplay mechanics and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure the UI is going to evolve and get better when you get into the alpha stages, especially into the beta stages of that. I think most of that's more of UI design layout with maybe some mechanics thrown in to make things easier.
We, so our tooling needs to get better. Our developing tooling
Mhm.
needs to get a lot better for working with UI. But you're right; it's going to evolve. UI is it's one of the last things that's ever finished in a
Yeah,
game, and it's probably never finished, but it evolves all the way up to the last moment.
yeah. And I agree with you that it's never finished. I mean, look at the UI for EverQuest. When it originally launched, it had this big sort of box around you, and then you had the little screen in it. And now it's like full view with transparent parts, and just things have completely changed with the UI in EverQuest. And I expect the same thing is probably going to happen with Stars Reach. Even past launch, you guys may make some changes to improve the ease of use of the interface for the game. And I think that's a smart move to do that, and especially in direction that games take and what works for you guys the best. That's what makes the game more fun. And once again, reason why people will keep coming back is because you guys are updating and changing things even after launch.
Yeah, that's part of being a live service game these days
Yeah.
is constant addition, constant change, um, making the game sticky.
Yeah.
Like,
Definitely.
by there always being something new to come back and experience.
Yeah.
Um,
So, well, I've taken enough of your time, Damien. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me. And hopefully, I see you in game sometime. And, I look forward to seeing the future work that you do on the game. And everyone, have a great day.